Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and we're here with another Sunday sew along as we're working through Vogue 1650. Okay, this sew along has been fraught with so many whoopsies or unforeseen things, maybe not so unforeseen things. It's I think I mentioned it last week. I was talking to my sister and she said this is either going to be a bomb of a sew along or like the best thing you've ever made. I'm like, I hope it's that one, the second. Anyway, so today we are going through the body of the coat. So we are sewing the fronts together because there's the side fronts to create two one-hole fronts. And again, we've got separate pattern pieces for the left front and the right front. They're a little different. So we're putting those together, and then we are sewing our back together that has our vent, and then I thought we would go ahead and make our shield, or what's it called? The front shield? I think it's called the shield. So that front piece that also attaches to the back shield, going ahead and constructing that, and then getting our pockets attached to the facings, so those will get sewn onto the back of the coat next week. So we're doing all of that. Now, when I was filming this, I was using my new microphone. I was also filming with my camera with a smaller lens on it so that I could, because my microphone just goes easier on my camera than it does with my phone. I can use it with my phone. It's just, there's not really a place to put it. Anyway, so let me know. I feel like the footage, I was zoomed out as far as I could get, and I still feel like it's pretty close. With my phone, I can get a wider shot, so I can zoom out more. So let me know, number one, if you do prefer the phone versus the camera, because I'll be finishing this sew along this coming week. So just let me know in the comments below. I won't have filmed anything probably until, Tuesday or Wednesday this coming week. So let me know on that. Also, while I was doing that, because I had switched from the microphone on my phone to my camera, and did I test things? My husband's like, well, didn't you test? Yes, I tested. Somehow the cord that plugs into the back of the microphone got pulled out, snagged just enough. I mean, it looked like it was in, and it was in pretty securely, but not all the way in. And I have no sound. None. I sewed everything, all the things I said, and it recorded zero sound. So we're trying something new today. I'd like to, so anyway, basically I went from 47 minutes of footage for this tutorial down to 22 because I chat at you guys while I'm sewing, and I like to think, probably not all of it, that it's useful tips as I'm thinking of them as we're going. Probably a lot of it is filler because, as we all know, I do chat a lot. It's kind of one of the things that probably I need to work on just a little bit, condensing things. But anyway, because I didn't know what I was saying, I am going through all the steps, and you're going to hear the voiceover of me talking over it and instructing you what I'm doing. But do you guys like that better? So let me know if that's something, even if I do go back to the camera, I could still just do the voiceover later. It will make the sew-alongs just a little bit shorter, and that might, for that type of video might be better. So let me know if you like that. Also, I'm not putting any music, like even a light music background while I'm talking. Does that seem too stark? Do you guys think maybe just a little bit of very, subdued music, enough that it's not distracting, low enough that it's not distracting, but at least to give a little bit of something background? Let me know. We're just going to play around with editing. So maybe this was a happy accident. Maybe this is a better way for me to do the sew-alongs. I don't know. So let me know all that down below, but that's why things are a little different. And again, I do think I'll probably go back to my phone because when I was editing the footage, I just feel like it's too close up. Like I need to be able to pan out a little bit better. So, let me know, but I'll probably will go back to my phone. But yeah, let me know if you prefer me chatting as I'm sewing with that noise, or if you prefer this more condensed voiceover work for these sew-alongs. Okay, that's all I have. All right, next week we will be, gosh, I don't know, because I haven't done it yet, what we're doing. Anyway, I'm sure the pockets will be going on. We'll be attaching the shield to the jacket, attaching the fronts and backs together. That's probably what we'll be doing this next week. Maybe prepping the collar, I'm not sure, or maybe prepping the sleeves. We'll find out. It'll be a that's an adventure. Again, I'm doing this almost live with you guys, which is not typical. And probably I will finish sewing it this week, and then everything will be pre-recorded from that point on. But yeah, this has been a beast, but I think it's gonna be so good when it's done. I think it's gonna be a really great jacket. So hang with me, and this is gonna be, yeah, maybe we find some new things that we like better for this sew along. All right, that's all I have for today. Tuesday, I have, we're gonna be going back into the wardrobe talking, but I'm actually gonna be talking about specific pieces. So now we're gonna start bringing in pieces, including some of the things that I've made from the previous module plans that I did, and a couple of things that I still wanna make. I think I'm gonna break it up into like bottoms and dresses, and then another separate video for the tops. And then one for like shoes and accessories and stuff, because that's all gonna be included in this wardrobe. So that's what we have to look forward to. We're getting there. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see you all on Tuesday. Bye. Okay guys, so we'll be doing steps 1 through 10, and then steps 13 through 18 in your instruction manual. Right now we're using pieces 1, 2, and 3, which are the left front, right front, and the side front that I just pulled off. And first things first, we are going to be starting by doing a reinforcement notch on right here at this point on the pattern. I like to shorten my stitch length to 1.5 millimeters, and we start about an inch away from the dot, so to the dot and then down. Again, an inch either way. That's going to be a little reinforcement when we go to sew the side panel in, because we are sewing a right angle. Okay. I also want to apologize for any feedback noise that you might be hearing, like a low rumble behind me. Playing around with this microphone is so sensitive that you can hear my fluorescent lighting, so I apologize. It's good to have a nice microphone, but it does pick that up. All right, I'll just be showing you on one side, and then obviously we'll be doing the same on the other side. I'm also filming on a camera in today's tutorial. Next week I am going to flip back to my phone, I think, just because I can get a wider angle, and I can pan out a little bit more. You can see a little bit more. So I do apologize for it being so up close in all the shots today. All right, so again, 1.5 millimeters for this stitch length. I'm going to be sewing with the wrong side up so that I can see my dot that I am sewing to. Okay, so here we go. Okay, once we have sewn that reinforcement corner, we're going to clip to, but not through that spot. So go ahead and clip into that. This is going to help make a pivot point. I also apologize for the frame there. Help make a pivot point when we go to sew that right angle in with the side piece. Okay, now it's time to put piece 3, and we're going to start with this long edge. Nice little pivot point there. But we're going to start with the long edge of the front and sew that first, and then we'll pivot around to do the shorter piece after we get past that corner. So this is where we're heading. This is the other side that I've already done. You can see that we've got a nice corner, and there's top stitching, and then I will show you the back, but we've got just a really nice right corner. And then on the back, all right, there we go. So I have sewn everything and pressed everything towards the body of the coat. You could finish off that seam allowance if you want. It's going to be covered up with lining, so it just kind of depends on how ravelly your fabric is. I'm not going to be doing mine. But yeah, we'll have everything pressed to the body of the coat when all is said and done. So that's where we're headed. Now we're going to get started. So long edges first, and there are notches on that piece 3 that should match up with the long edge on your 2 front pieces, which are pieces 1 and 2, depending on which side you're doing. And we've got a match point at the top of piece 3 that should match to that match point that's there where we clipped into the corner. So you want to put a pin there and then match your notches there on that long straightaway piece. But your top of your side piece should just be completely opposite, so like a straight line from that edge there on the body of the coat. You want those to be completely opposite, kind of a straight line, sewing line basically, because that will get rotated. But this is the orientation that you want first. I'm also going to sew with the body of the coat up so that when I get up to that corner, I can see my previous stitching, and I don't, I either want to sew right on top of that reinforcement stitching or right inside of that, so that that line of reinforcement stitching is just right inside the seam allowance. So you're sewing a little bit into the body of the coat from that like 1 stitch over from that reinforcement line, just to make sure everything stays nice and hidden when everything gets turned right side out. So here we go, 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 seam allowances. Again, body of the coat up so I can see that reinforcement stitching line. All right. I'm pointing there, that's where the tops of your body of the coat versus the top of your side panel should be going opposite directions. And I'm going to get up to that point, move my pen, and backstitch. And my machine goes forward 1 stitch in the back stitch, which is, a little bit annoying, because you'll see here I accidentally go 1 stitch too far past my dot, which isn't, it's not part of the back, it is, but it doesn't really, it's not the locking part of the stitch. So it's easy to go back and kind of pick that out, just that 1 stitch out, so that everything will turn nice and neatly. So once I've done that, we are going to turn the work, and now we're going to sew the other side. Okay, so now we want to match the short sides. So you're going to see here, I've got, they're still going opposite directions. So I'm going to bring the side, front, top, and twist it around, which is we're allowed to do because we have clipped into that seam. And I'm just going to match my raw edges. Now there are notches up here, and I have no idea why they didn't match up, but it worked fine for me, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But we're just going to kind of go with it. So now we're going to sew, and I'm going to start again with the body of the coat up so I can see that reinforcement stitching. I'm going to start right where I stopped stitching on that long piece, and I'm going to manually with the hand crank drop my needle right where we stopped sewing, because I want to keep things nice and flat, and I don't want anything to catch or bubble up there. So just going to anchor my needle right where it needs to go. Sorry if you can also hear my dog snoring in the background. She's in the room with me, per normal. All right, so you're going to sew your 5/8 seam allowance here, little back stitch, and let's take a look at what we've got. Okay, when I flip it, you will notice that there's a little bit of what seems to be a pucker. I was able to completely steam that out. But if you do have a pucker there, it's easy if you need to go back and maybe unpick a couple stitches, reinforce a few things, maybe clip into your seam allowance where we've clipped into that reinforcement. Might need to be clipped just a little bit. But once everything was lying flat, that actually pressed right out. So take that into consideration. So now we're going to go over to the ironing board and give everything a press, and we're pressing the seam allowance towards the body of the coat. And now we're going to top stitch it. So I'm top stitching about 1/4 inch away from the seam line onto the body of the coat, so not the side coat. So I'm basically anchoring the seam allowance to the body of the coat here with a little less than 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I just use a regular stitch. If you want to lengthen your stitch length here, since it's a top stitching stitch, you're welcome to, but I just kept it the same. Also, I want to note that as I'm sewing, especially with top stitching, I'm kind of pulling that seam apart just a little bit, but my fabric has stretch in it, so if I pull too hard, I'll get a really wavy seam. So you want to be careful. You want to give slight tension just to make sure you don't have any of the seam like bubbling, you know, folded over on itself a little. Go up here, we're going to anchor it, turn it, but I do pull it slightly, but again, it will wave. You can kind of see where it waved a little bit there. Steam will fix that. If you hover your iron and steam it, it will steam it right back into shape, and then you can press it and everything is good to go. But yeah. All right, time for the back. So we have 2 separate back pieces, which are pieces 4 and 5 for your left back and your right back. We're actually going to be starting with your right back. And we're going to be sewing a reinforcement stitch similar to what we did on the front. We're going to be sewing about 1 inch above and 1 inch below, I guess, that dot. It turns, but you know, we're going to sew to the dot about 1 inch above and then sew down about another inch with a 1.5 millimeter seam allowance, which really just going to help reinforce. Now, when this was all done, I don't know why they didn't have you reinforce the other side of the vent as well, because we clip into that seam, but you know, I was following the instructions on this one, so there you go. So I have the wrong side facing up. I think this is piece 4. I don't really remember my piece numbers. That's not good. But this is the right back. So we are going to sew about 1 inch above our match point down to that dot, and then we're going to pivot and sew about 1 inch past. And I'm sewing right on the stitching line, so right at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 seam allowance. And then we're not going to clip yet. So we've sewn that reinforcement line, but we are not going to clip yet. So now we have, this is our left back, which I think is piece 5. And we are going to do some pressing. So we are just going to fold this over right at the edge of that interfacing. And it's going to get folded to the wrong side, so you're folding it wrong sides together. And we're just going to go over to the ironing board and give that a really good press. And we're pressing that all the way to the hem. All right, once we've given that a really good press, there it is. And again, we've gone all the way to the hem. It doesn't stay equal once you get to the bottom of the hem, because the bottom of the hem is cut at an angle for the miter. But yeah. Okay, now we're going to sew our center backs together. There are 3 notches there, matching your center backs. So I'm just going to pin. It's a long length, so we're just going to pop a couple pins. So this is going from the neck edge down to the point of the vent, and then we're going to sew across the top of the vent. And that's going to sew our center back together. So there we are at the vent, so I'm just going to match the points there. Now your left back is going to stay folded. Again, I'm sorry for the close-up shots. It makes it really hard to see. I apologize. But we're going to just put our pin in here, right at that match point, so that's right where we flipped it there for the reinforcement stitching. We want those to match on both sides. You have that point on both pattern pieces. And then we want the left back will stay folded. So we want that to stay folded, and your right back is going to be open as cut. So when we sew across the top of the vent, we're just going to sew right off the fold of that bottom piece. So now we're sewing from the neck all the way down. And then when we get to the point here, right here, we are going to lift your presser foot and pivot, and then we are just sewing right off of that folded vent that's on the bottom. So you don't really need to sew to the far edge. You'll feel yourself go off that fold, and that's where we stop. And now we are going to clip in to the seam allowance there, right at that corner where we pivoted, so that we can press the seam allowance open above that point, and then press our vent to the well, the left. When you have the wrong side facing you, it's the left. So that would be, I guess, the right when worn. Gets confusing when you're talking front and back and everything else. So we're just going to go press that seam allowance open above that point right there, and then we'll press them to the left below. And again, your right back, is that right? Your left back is already folded, and then you'll be pressing a crease into the other side. All right, so here is our seam all nice and pressed. This is the right side of the coat, and you can kind of see, we'll get down here to the vent, and you can see where that's all nice and pressed. I have a feeling we'll be top stitching that vent eventually, but not yet. Okay, so on the wrong side, we have it all nice and pressed open above that clip, and then below, it's flipping to the wrong side here, but below we have it pressed to the left. I'm sorry for the seasickness. So it's folded on that side, or on both sides, but you have a little bit of a seam allowance poking out from the bottom there, and the left back piece is already folded over on itself. But that's what that should look like. Again, I apologize for that camera work. All right, now we're going to prep our pocket to sew in next time. This is pieces 6 and 7. Piece 6 is actually called the extension. It's basically a pocket facing. I was really perplexed as to what this piece was until I actually got into the sewing, since it was just called extension. So I don't know why they didn't call it pocket extension or something like that. But this is basically the facing, and it's going to get sewn to piece 7. Piece 7 are the pieces of pocketing that we cut out of lining fabric, and I've done mine out of a rayon batiste. We will be sewing the this extension piece has a long side and a shorter long side, and we'll be sewing the longer long side to the side of the pocket here, and there are notches to match. The little angled corner there is at the bottom of the pocket, just for reference. Now, if your lining fabric does look different or looks the same on both sides like mine, you do want to make sure and mark that, because that can get very confusing, and you don't want to have two of the same pockets. So you want to make sure that you are making mirror pockets, one for each side of the coat. And I'll be sewing this long seam with the lining down, and then the interfaced extension piece up. That allows the feed dogs just to really feed that slipperier and finer fabric more evenly, and because my interface piece is obviously more stable. So we'll be starting here at the bottom, stitching at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters, and we are going to just stitch all the way there, and then I didn't use any pins here, but I'm just, easing that in to make sure that that pocketing stays. And then once we've done that, we're going to push the seam allowance, and I had a hard time doing this because it wanted to go towards the lining, but you want the seam allowance to go towards that facing piece, that extension piece. So I'm pushing the seam allowance to the right there towards that extension, and I am understitching it to the fashion fabric there, so to the extension piece. All right. So now we've got one pocket done. I'm going to do the same on the other side, the other pocket. Obviously, it will be the opposite because it's the other side of the pocket, and we will attach these to the body of the coat. It gets attached to the back next week. I just wanted to have these nice and prepped and ready to go so that we could easily do that next week. So there we have it. There are our back pocket pieces, and the front part of the pocket pieces are the grown-on pieces on that side piece. And now we're going to work on this, the back and front side shield that goes across the top. So you should have piece 9 and 10, and piece 9 is cut out on the fold, and piece 10 is cut out with the your pattern piece up and the right side of the fabric up, which is important because that you only are cutting out one. It's very important to note. And then with our lining, you want to cut out one on the fold, and then your piece 10 will be flipped upside down with the right side of the lining facing up. So I'm sewing the darts now into the body of the back part. Basically, there's 2 darts in the back. These will get sewn into both the fashion fabric and the lining, so make sure that you do that on both. You can press them to the side seams or the center back. I just do the lining opposite of what I've done the fashion fabric. And now it makes it sandwiching but much better. So now we're going to sew our side seam together, and this is lined up on the left side. So these are right sides together. We're sewing the side seam first, the front shield to the back shield. And then with our shoulder, we have added that extra width into that back shoulder. So we're going to be easing the back into the front. So I'm sewing with the back against the feed dogs because that will ease it for me. It takes all of the hard work out of that, sewing at 5/8 of an inch. And I'm just pulling that back piece down to where my raw edges match, just so the feed dogs will give me a nice gentle easing throughout that entire back seam. And there is ease built into the back shoulder seam a little bit. I've just added more by extending the back piece by 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to show you once it's all sewn. Again, sorry for the camera work on this. I feel like this isn't my best work. But the back seam is kind of wavy. I don't have any pinches sewn in, but it's nice and wavy and gives me the fullness that I need there. So that side and shoulder seam will get pressed open, and then the darts will get pressed. And then you're going to do the same with the lining. Now, because we're making mirror images, your lining, when it gets sewn right sides together, it'll be actually sewing it onto the right shoulder. Now, this will all make sense when we sew these the fashion fabric and the lining right sides together, but you need those to be opposite. You need them to be mirror pieces. So that's something too. It's hard when you just have one piece, or when you have, you know, this coat was filled with that. You know, you had separate pieces for the left and the right, and you need things facing the right way. So now I'm going to sew along this front edge, around the corner, and then around the whole bottom of the piece. And that's it. So everything else is going to get caught into various seam allowances. So we're just going to be sewing along that edge, right sides together. So we'll be doing that, and again, I'm going to sew with my lining down, and this gets sewn at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Don't we wish it was this fast in real life? Wouldn't that be lovely? And be careful around the corner, go slowly. I even stop here because I thought that my lining was creeping away from me, and it was fine, but sometimes that can happen, especially when you're going around the corners. So I'm going to do that and go all the way across the back. I have pressed my darts in opposite directions for my lining and my fashion fabric, so everything should nest really well. Oh my gosh, can you guys hear my dog snoring? I apologize. All right, once those have been sewn together, right sides together, I'm going to go in with my scissors and trim that seam allowance to half. So I'm just cutting the seam allowance in half, so I don't know, in between 3/8 and 1/4 of an inch. Just trimming that whole seam allowance all the way around the corner and up. And then once I've done that, I'm going to clip into the curve about, I don't know, 1/4 inch apart, clipping to but not through that stitching line, just around that curve, so that when I flip things right side out, I can get a really good press. And once we've done that, we're going to go back and stitch that same seam again at 1/4 of an inch, and I'm top stitching. So I'm just going to go around that same seam that I just turned right side out, and we are just going all the way around it, top stitching it to keep everything in place. And once we have top stitched that really nice and neat, now you can go and match all of your raw edges, so that's the neck edge, and just give them a baste. So that'll be the neck edge, that'll be one of the side seams, one of the shoulder seams, and around the armhole. Just baste those together because those will get sewn into, those will be put against the body of the coat. Yes, because it gets a little confusing, and we'll do that next week. All right, see ya.